This post is called The Factors of Balance, and I published it Monday, December 21st, 2014. And it's pretty long. It's a bunch of things all compiled together again. And I said, in this post, I want to investigate the human evolutionary impulse and its current trends and tendencies, particularly in the transhumanism movement, which has been increasingly discussed in the public media venue as of late, as well as supplementary and/or alternative directions in which we can consider as given by various occultists, shamans, and others who have worked in this regard. I think this topic is of prime importance in the subject of thelemic eonology, as the subject of transhumanism will be seen to be a unique manifestation in the unfoldment of man's physical and spiritual evolution as typical of the Horus Maat current, which is explicitly identified as Prumachus in Librael, Horus of the double horizon, typical of the two truths of Maat and thus the double wand of power. The Maotian inductions of Freder Achad, Kenneth Grant, Nima Andahadna, Michael Berteau, myself, and others should be analyzed alongside preceding material on which our work is based to see how much the concept and current of Maat has infused the Horus or 93 current initiated by Crowley. Not only does their work show that much of the material which can now be accessed via Crowley and his circles is indubitably active and useful, but that there is still much to be expanded upon and worked out. And as Amalantra said, the egg is a work which must be done, the great work. In Liber 729, the Amalantra working. Examination of the various sociological, philosophical, and spiritual implications of this subject are far deeper than any one single exegesis can cover, but I will set forth certain primary points of interest and concern which I have, and I'm sure they will be intriguing and possibly even similar to the thoughts and views of the readers. As usual, key concepts will be broken down, analyzed, and correlated with relevant words or phrases via the Kabbalistic practice of gematria, not only showing its special significance in this subject, but also the fact that much has still to be learned and understood, which we have been unaware of and may find beneficial having the insight of, rather than not. Application of the set formulas which I've explained in previous posts, see words and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, are merely being tested and analyzed according to the basic scientific method to investigate phenomena, acquire new knowledge, and correct and/or integrate previous knowledge. The Oxford English Dictionary defines the scientific method as a method or procedure that has characterized natural science since the 17th century, consisting in the systematic observation, measurement, and experiment in the formulation, testing, and modification of hypotheses. In this and other works, I have systematically observed the material being measured according to the numerical value or weight of its various possible linguistic expressions, in English, Hebrew, Greek, etc. I have experimented with various renderings and applications. For example, I have shown that 251 is the number of both circle in Hebrew English gematria, as well as Kurla, which is mentioned by Grant extensively in Beyond the Mauve Zone as a basic phonetic form of the Sanskrit word Korlo, I think it's Tibetan actually. A wheel or circle, see break the cycle. I used this as an example since the word itself also has the same value, which is a valid application which could even be used geometrically since, as I mentioned in the previous post, the O gate, 251 plus 109, which is the Hebrew number for circle or round, equals 360, the number of degrees in a full circle. Also, 109 is Mahayana, the great vehicle, too. So this further correlates with the testing of the hypothesis in using various ciphers to try to correlate relevant values. And we do. In Jewish or Masonic gematria, 360 is the value of circle ratio. and in Greek it is the full value of omicron, the lesser O or circle, which has the value of 70 as opposed to the higher omega, 800. Enough examples have been given in previous posts. This one was necessary to open up the subjects at hand for further consideration. Note that this lower O is symbolic of the lower microcosmic world of the self, 360, as the I, AN, or 70, whereas the omega, or mega O, which mega, again, is great, is the higher macrocosmic ring pass naught of the outer universe. Together they formulate the infinite waveform, or hourglass, of time-space as the Ein Sof, or double O, of the boundless Ein Sof, or infinity. This is significant since the value of the Greek letter omega is the unification of these figures as 800, or 800. However, omega in full has a value of 849, which is also the value of megas cosmos, or macrocosm in Greek, showing the intuitive placement of the final O as being correct, hence the bi-O, or double O, which is expressed in the formula discussed by Crowley and Grant as 0 equals 2. Again, bio being the life force. The circle is especially relevant in this analysis since it represents both the physical cell of a bioorganic life form as common on Earth, as well as the basic planetary celestial shape itself, i.e. Malkuth, in the magnetic field and all that. It is also symbolic of what has been termed the spirit, which radiates in a circular or egg/wheel shape. It is significant that the root of the word biology is bio, since this is the bi-2-O mentioned above. This is the bi, or 2, or double O mentioned above, which brings to mind the 0 equals 2 formula and correlates with the Greek word zoe. Bio equals 82, which is the number of Zoe, meaning life. As 9 times 9, which is 81, plus 1, it is the 1 in the dream lattice of Lalita, an epithet of Shiva's wife, the goddess of bliss, whose name means she who plays. And obviously it's like a yesodic foundation number, a matrix number, you could say, relating to the root word lila, or play. 81 is also anitya, impermanence, as well as satya, unchangeable, which seemingly mean the opposite but are dual balancing forces of the I Ching, also 81, or the changes of the I, or 1. 82 is also the Atma Vidya, a Sanskrit word meaning self-knowledge or self-clarity, whose nature is the realization and awakening of the Buddhas, or awakened ones. Note also that the Greek bios, another word for life, equals 282, which is 28 and 82. 28 in Hebrew is ichi, meaning long live, sustain or revive, and ketch, or kaf chet, meaning power, strength, or vitality. 282 unifies all of these concepts as the cell biology. Note also that the number of life is 51, the number of Mayat, as well as the wheel of life. And 282 is also Kala Chakra, and 0 and 4. And 0 is obviously the void, 4 is like the cross, the crossing, and of the wheel. Kala Chakra is just pretty much the time wheel. The spirit is commonly thought to be theoretical, as it is not measurable by external physical means, only by personal experience and measurement against a background of various control subjects, or at least a wide range of varying and similar subjects who have had different degrees of spiritual experience, which would still be for the most part comprised of personal associations and knowledge instead of legitimately passable data, but nonetheless would serve to show an example of spiritual experiences being legitimate and innate if reappearing in individuals or groups unconnected from other individuals or groups following the same guidelines or reaching similar conclusions or states of being. In the most basic sense, the spirit can be... That just makes me think of how Gurdjieff's cosmology kind of does mesh well with Crowley's Kabbalah, if you look at them in the fact they themselves weren't really they didn't really work together, or they didn't even agree or like each other. And there is that book, Beelzebub and the Beast, by David Hall, but he doesn't really go into the gematria. But again, like in my later posts, the new model of the universe and all this sort of like miraculous gematria is, it kind of does show that there's an underlying reality, and in which the conscious mind, I don't think, fully grasps. It does take time and going through these cycles. In the most basic sense, the spirit can be understood as the mind, which, although being primarily based on the neurochemistry of the brain and nervous system, is nonetheless non-physical, as consciousness itself has never been found to emanate from any one physical organ, but the unification of all organs in one essential spirit, which again, yeah, like pervades. It's actually, I believe, there's a reciprocal or an integral relationship with the environment. Consciousness isn't just localized in the body. It permeates, or at least extends into the general vicinity. And like T.C. Lethbridge in, his book on ESP, one of the things that stood out is he talked about how before someone comes in a room, someone else in that room can almost sense basically a magnetic, like sparks, it would seem like, or some sort of movement prior to the actual coming in. And it's similar to like before someone calls and you almost sense someone's either going to call, or you think of the person in particular, or the same thing is with songs on the radio. It's a sort of, it shows that time itself is a sort, in a way, it's a continuum, like I've said before, but it may not just flow forward. In a way, who was it? Either Gurdjieff or Rudolf Steiner. I think it was Rudolf Steiner talks about time also kind of flowing backwards. I know that that's kind of a outlandish idea, but it's not like it even flows backwards. It's just that whatever things are in the future have obviously a connection with the present and the past. And that's not to say that there is absolutely no free will. It means that, again, the more conscious, it takes levels of awareness. And like Gurdjieff talks about, even when you're awake, your centers may not all be connected. And even like when you first wake up, you're not fully functional, and it can take a while to, fully get your gears going, so to speak. And again, like his whole concept of mechanicalness, the fact that equals 333 itself is kind of symbolic of that mechanicalness. And yet 333 is also symbolic of that, of a sort of doorway outside of the three dimensions. It's literally three-dimensional spelled out. So, which I found like, I don't know, there's just a lot to all of this. It's symbolic of the dream time and the time stations and of past, present, and future, but also that fourth state, which is like dissolution or turiya, but obviously also related to the fourth dimension and the fourth state of consciousness of waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and then that pervaded or all-pervasive Ananda or bliss. And again, Ananda 107, XYZ, all these things kind of relate. It's taken so long for this stuff to really, I guess, become so obvious. Maybe it's, I don't know. Consciousness itself has never been found to emanate from any one physical organ, but the unification of all organs in one essential spirit, which integrally animates not just it, i.e. the physical body, but also seems to emanate beyond the physical body as well, much like a magnetic field extends past the physical magnet. So yeah, and like I was just talking to a friend about how if the body, again, is, which it is, obviously a magnetic energy center field, basically, with the magnetic energy center, the head, your head would be like the top of the tower, so to speak, if it was an antenna. What else comes to mind is how Gurdjieff also calls it the formatory apparatus, basically your head, the thinking center, or the third eye. And in the book Views from the Real World, which are some of his original lectures before he thought of different ways to, couch his philosophies, he talks about the formatory apparatus and all this stuff that I think is the solution to much of not just what Crowley kind of left out, I think, in some practical aspects of the growth of the initiate, you could say, or just the person, if anyone. And same with Rudolf Steiner. Again, I've been studying him more, and I think that he isn't understood for a lot of reasons, but yet his work is the solution to a lot of the mechanicalness of man. And I'll get into the post, the mechanization of man, but all this stuff about transhumanism, there's a sort of dark side to it, in that it's not going to really provide much freedom or real biological advancement or evolution, and true evolution will only really come from within, not without, not externally, and it ends up bordering like gray alien territory, in the sense like if we become so dependent on augmentation and whatnot, basically we will fuck up our future lineages, our future bloodlines, future, just the whole future. And I can kind of already see it. Just that's what prompted me to want to make this whole post. I think other people saw it too, and like way back, the whole New Atlantis idea and some of these like utopian ideas, they're just, it's just something that you should approach with caution, not be so hell-bent on thinking that, I don't know. It's just a very checkered subject. So I should probably just keep going. Anyone who has looked at the wide range of approaches to technological transhumanism will be aware that discussion of the spirit is marked usually by two distinct schools of thought. That which utterly denies the idea of a human spirit or soul, and those that see transhumanism as detrimental to soul cultivation, expression, and fulfillment. These are generally the hardcore atheists vehemently opposing fundamental religious persons, or vice versa. The most vocal anti-transhumanists have been the Christians, who have called into question the various motives and possible outcomes of a blind sweeping step towards transhuman utopianism. Regardless of the validity of their complex or personal beliefs, I think it is safe to say they are justified in their apprehension of something which is, for the most part, unnatural and inorganic, and therefore aspiritual and potentially anti-human. Modern transhumanism is a cleaned-up version of what the Nazis were trying to implement through heinous control measures about what constitutes a healthy contributor of society worthy of reproduction, pretty much eugenics. Now, instead of racial and ethnographic features being the determinant, intelligence and genetic expression with design or genetic modification are more important focuses. Under a complete technocracy where the citizens' very bodies and minds are interfaced with government or corporate-controlled computer systems, the Nazis could quickly look like primitive social controllers rather than fully fledged planetary engineers with virtually total control of the transhuman populations and systems. In such a case, transhuman immortality would be nothing more than programmed automatism and essentially pointless, as there would be no measure of progress or purpose in activity on this planet. The life force known as the spirit would cease to be, and as the materialists would be justified in their own assertion, that of total nothingness, which is typical of their own aspiritual nature, but not discounting the spiritual natures of those who have such a capacity. So I know that's a weird run-on sentence. But yeah, basically they want to drain the life force if there is any, so they can be justified in claiming, oh, there's no life force, even though, I don't know. It's just, I think it is a fine line to talk about what constitutes a spirit or a soul or anything like that, because again, it's not necessarily measured in quantifiable physical terms. It's something that almost, it's like, by their fruits you shall know them. Some people can only consume, can only be entertained, can only joke, can never really think, can never really focus, can never really do anything other than destroy. And I just think that that's ironic that those are the types of people who tend to claim authority. It's like, no, bitch, shut up. And by that, I hope you recognize, it's like, okay, so what is, it's more than just words. The words, bodies, all of these, they're vessels for energy. And energy, it's how anything has any meaning. It's how pictures have meaning, when it's really just, at least on a screen, pixels or droplets of paint or ink or whatever. And it's the memory, it's the meaning behind things, obviously. And so I just think that it's funny that people get upset over something that they ultimately say has no meaning. Well, if it has no meaning, you wouldn't be upset. Just because, and it's not my purpose to make anyone upset. It's just that by talking about these sort of things, they get upset. It's like, well, if it has no meaning, why are you so upset? But anyway, just because you may not be spiritual or are unable to empathetically resonate with certain deep matters which are beyond the physical sensory scope does not mean such realities are non-existent. Again, and it just makes me think of most people armor themselves within their little narrow construct or reality tunnel or focus, and they will reinforce that, and it's a belief system sort of thing. And people who are anti-religious tend to do that to such a degree that they become religious in their methodology and in their psychology, in a way that because they can't possibly think that they would be like that. They can't understand that they are like that. And I mean, maybe I'm like that in some ways. I try not to alienate myself from people, but in a way they alienate themselves from me, because I don't want to limit myself to those sort of very limited and constricted mindsets. But yet, I understand there's a fine line. Like, some people go way overboard with thoughts and theories and beliefs and conspiracies and all this stuff. And I think a lot of that is just, I think the mind and information, knowledge, all this stuff is a sandbox in which you're free to, build things, and things don't necessarily have to be permanent. And yet people, that's the problem. People are like, oh, we can't change anything. One person can't change it. Well, we all can. And that's how we build reality. That's how things are the way they are, because we've decided, well, it just sucks that the majority of people decide to, it's basically, again, at least the main definition that people like to use for insanity, doing the same thing, expecting different results. And in a way, humans, I think there's something to be said, like, for psychology, obviously, but there's not enough, there is no real consensus view or agreement. There's like different schools of psychology and stuff, and a lot of people disagree. Well, the reason why is because the mind itself is fluid, it's plastic, it's creative. And so a lot of people, like, there is no real one map, there's no one size fits all, like, book or manual, as much as people would like there to be. But there are, in a way, like, certain rules or axioms, but again, like, that's not to say that you can't. A lot of it is based on habit, and again, like a foundation in which slowly you strengthen yourself on. That's what language itself is pretty much is. And so this whole thing of people claim, like, I was skeptical of mind control myself, and I've brought this up before, but essentially mind control has so many connections to it, it becomes coterminous basically with a lot of other subjects that themselves, like, bleed in and blend into other subjects, that it's just like, why do people insist on them staying so separate and then denying their existence or validity or creative potential? I don't know. It's just, and I don't know. It's so ironic, like the duality in which things are, the way things are is just, it's all inverted. And anyway, ignorance of such philosophical premises as those presented in the mass of spiritual material throughout human history is just as condemnable of a scientist as ignorance of modern information is ignored by orthodox believers unwilling to change or expand their views. So basically, yeah, like, a lot of you'd be surprised, well, maybe you wouldn't if you obviously look at YouTube. There's a surprising, there's just, you'd be surprised at how much people want to, like, destroy all the evidence and all the history. It's even if it is bullshit, or even cults and stuff, like, are important to study for psychology, like serial kill. I mean, go to any criminology 101 high school class and you'll learn serial killers and all these people, as dark and bad as some of it may be. If you want to prevent, or at least progress, you got to study these sort of things. And so I don't know, it's just very strange to me, the level of fucking ignorance, with endless evidence of scientific atheists being just as hostile and ruthless in their persecution of religious individuals and groups, with a prime target being Christians, because they, again, I mean, I know Christians make it easy. All of this goes to show a lot of hypocrisy that needs to be moved beyond, as well as esotericists. We can see that religion in and of itself is not the cause of all human suffering and hatred like some of such an inclination claim. Eradication of a group deemed lower, unfit, or unworthy, such as the religious classes, is not impossible or improbable when they are made to be seen as threats to the control system which seeks complete dominion over all aspects of life on earth. Not only that, the notion of the spirit itself is understood as being supremely fatal to the transhuman idealist's ego, which seeks to set itself over all else, even at the expense of innocent lives. And again, there's a lot of people like to try to claim they're the moral authority of, pretty much mental hygiene, and yet they harass, abuse, and in some cases physically abuse or kill people to this day. I mean, I have evidence of, even literally right down the road from me at a medical center, there's been abuse for apparently decades. And I'm sure because it's a military medical center, they probably do experiments on the people there because they're considered property of the state, just like service people are. And so it's just all fucked up that people will rationalize this, and then they'll claim to be the moral authority, the mental authority, the intellectual authority. And if anyone was the useless eaters, it would be, here's some things that I found significant. The eugenics tree. We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. Margaret Sanger. Buck versus Bell, 274 U.S. 200, 1927, is a decision of the United States Supreme Court written by Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr., in which the court ruled that a state statute permitting compulsory sterilization of the unfit, including the intellectually disabled, for the protection and health of the state did not violate the due process clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. The decision was largely seen as an endorsement of negative eugenics, the attempt to improve the human race by eliminating defectives from the gene pool. The Supreme Court has never expressly overruled Buck versus Bell. However, in the last 50 years, both federal and state courts have severely criticized and questioned the legal reasoning underlying the decision. See cases collected in Jeffrey F. Gent, Validity of Statutes Authorizing Asexualization or Sterilization of Criminals or Mental Defectives, 53 ALR 3D 960. Origin of Nazi eugenics. Hitler and the Nazi Party claimed that one of their major goals was to apply this accepted science to society. And the core idea of Darwinism was not evolution but selection. Evolution describes the results of selection. Hitler stressed that to produce a better society, we, the Nazis, must understand and cooperate with science. And we still, again, hear the same thing. At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider, for it will intervene between man and a more civilized state, and some ape as low as a baboon instead of as now between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. Charles Darwin, 1890. This is exemplified by many transhumanists who sincerely think that they are somehow different than those they see as lower, who do the same thing based on their twisted religious views. Only they don't use Levitical or Sharia legislation of bygone eras for their justification. They use extremely nihilistic and dehumanizing perspectives, which are closely paralleled by Nazi-style eugenics and Superman-type thinking, as well as, again, like Mao Zedong, and their sort of like state atheism, much of which is just as wishful as the paradise offered by religionists. So yeah, again, it's a same sort of apocalypse promise, or a hope in this sort of paradise, or Zionism, or the new earth, heaven on earth, whatever. And it's it is a destructive philosophy, or theology, or whatever you want to construct. So I don't know. It just needs. I've seen it in both sides of this, the religious and the anti-religious. And this guy, he seems pretty psychotic.
We are going to become gods. Period. If you don't like it, get off. You don't have to contribute. You don't have to participate. And if you're going to interfere with me becoming God, you're going to have big trouble.
Again, it's the ego.
And we'll have warfare.
It's his clinging to his need to be God. We are going to become gods, period. If you don't like it, get off. You don't have to contribute. You don't have to participate. But if you're going to interfere with me becoming God, then we'll have big trouble. We'll have warfare. The only way to prevent me is to kill me. And you kill me, I'll kill you. Nuclear physicist and cloning researcher. And again, there's people at like pharmaceutical companies and biolabs that waste their time like stalking people and making fun. It's like, yeah, you're gonna become God. Yeah, yeah, right. This is, I mean, it just goes back to really, really far conundrums that I think it just goes to show, like, how do you get beyond that sort of thing? I don't know. These people are just fucking retarded. It sure is ironic how atheistic scientists denounce anything to do with God or metaphysical forces, which in the past were conceived of as gods, yet at the same time they say they want to become God or God-like. How can this be if such a position is an impossibility? Surely their wishes for immortality are pipe dreams, because a quick burp from the sun could shut them all off rather easily, unless they are able to tap into the quantum matrix itself and extricate themselves from the forces of space-time, which again are themselves not physical, thereby rendering them non-physical constructs themselves. Some are and have been attempting to do this with things like Large Hadron Colliders, but even the scientific research done in this realm proves that metaphysical or subatomic forces, which are beyond the scope of natural human senses, the typical sensory senses, input, etc., in psychology do in fact exist at the quantum level of being, not necessarily material insofar as we conceive of tangible hard matter. The problem is mainstream academic sciences trying to dig into and understand levels of reality which are, in the true sense of the word, mystical, i.e. metaphysical. The true underlying bedrock of reality is not gross matter as it is perceived by the mind of the individual, Descartes. It is the perceptive mind itself. Any attempt at pointing to or ascertaining the mind by the mind results in nothing but vivid imagery of a seemingly eternal play of identification with the accordion-like contents of memory and imagination, with the mind itself acting as a menstruum of magical, Maic monastic manifestation. Materialistic scientists want to find physical corroboration for meta or beyond physical conceptual realities. In occult terminology, this is what is called confusing the planes, the naive interpretation of esoteric and allegorical data in literal exoteric ways. Such is the thinking of he who takes the alchemical gold to be physical, and not symbolic of the integration of the various primary metals or elements, numbers, components, etc., into one which transcends them all in balanced unity. In the section called The Epistemological Cartel of the essay The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship, Philip D. Collins summarizes the situation in quoting from The Architectural of Modern Political Power by Daniel Puzner, as well as Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. In The Architecture of Modern Political Power, Daniel Puzner outlines the tactics employed by the elite to maintain their dominance. Among them is ostensible control over the knowable, by marketing institutionally accredited science as the only path to true understanding. Thus, the ruling class endeavors, which again, there's such a lag in the official and academic community that there is no free thinking. It's all a century behind, at least in so many fields, and yet the people who go beyond those limitations are pretty much heretics. It's a neo sort of like modern inquisition of sorts in terms of, it's like an intellectual inquisition. Not that there's necessarily hangings and, well, in some cases there is medical abuse, but it's more like careers are ruined or put on hold or completely sabotaged or whatever. Again, by people who claim to be somehow positive, progressive. Thus, the ruling class endeavors to discourage independent reason while exercising illusory power over human knowledge. This tactic of control through knowledge suppression and selective dissemination is reiterated in the anonymously authored document Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. Again, all these documents and stuff that are so like, even, what is it, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I'm not saying I believe it or agree fully with it, but you'd be surprised how much of it is actually pretty, applicable. Anyway, energy is recognized as the key to all activity on Earth. Natural science is the study of the sources and control of natural energy, and social science, theoretically expressed as economics, is the study of the sources and control of social energy. Both are bookkeeping systems. Mathematics is the primary energy science, and the bookkeeper can be king if the public can be kept ignorant of the methodology of the bookkeeping. So, again, think of the gematria. All science is merely a means to an end. The means is knowledge. The end is control. Jim Keith in Secret and Suppressed, page 203. The word science is derived from the Latin word scientia, meaning, scire, which is also dividing, which means knowing. Epistemology is the study of the nature and origin of knowledge. This elite monopoly of the knowable, which is enforced through institutional science, could be characterized as an epistemological cartel. The ruling class has bribed the bookkeepers, i.e. natural and social scientists. Meanwhile, the masses practically defy the bookkeepers of the elite and remain ignorant of the methodology of the bookkeeping. The unknown author of Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars provides an eloquently simple summation. The means is knowledge, the end is control. Beyond this remains only one issue. Who will be the beneficiary? Well, ultimately no one, at least on Earth. Jim Keith, Secret and Suppressed, page 203. In Brave New World Revisited, Aldous Huxley more succinctly defined this epistemological cartel. The older dictators fell because they could never supply their subjects with enough bread, enough circuses, enough miracles and mysteries. Under a scientific dictatorship, education will really work with the result that most men and women will grow up to love their servitude and will never dream of revolution. There seems to be no good reason why a thoroughly scientific dictatorship should ever be overthrown. Huxley, Brave New World Revisited, page 116. And I changed my mind. This isn't just the objective of the elite. It's also obviously of the masses as well, unfortunately. An oligarchy legitimized by arbitrarily anointed expositors of knowledge, or, in Huxley's own words, a scientific dictatorship. And arbitrarily, I mean, there will be some hierarchy, obviously, but arbitrarily in the sense that, obviously, these people are fucking hypocrites.
This is Aldous Huxley, a man haunted by a vision of hell on earth. A searing social critic, Mr. Huxley, 27 years ago, wrote Brave New World, a novel that predicted that someday the entire world would live under a frightful dictatorship. Today, Mr. Huxley says that his fictional world of horror is probably just around the corner for all of us. We'll find out why in a moment.
The Mike Wallace Interview, presented by the American Broadcasting Company in association with the Fund for the Republic, brings you a special television series discussing the problems of survival and freedom in America.
Good evening, I'm Mike Wallace. Tonight's guest, Aldous Huxley, is a man of letters, as disturbing as he is distinguished. Born in England, now a resident of California, Mr. Huxley has written some of the most electric novels and social criticism of this century. He's just finished a series of essays called Enemies of Freedom, in which he outlines and defines some of the threats to our freedom in the United States. And Mr. Huxley, right off the bat, let me ask you this. As you see it, who and what are the enemies of freedom here in the United States?
Well, I don't think you can say who in the United States. I don't think there are any sinister persons deliberately trying to rob people of their freedom. But I do think, first of all, that there are a number of impersonal forces which are pushing in the direction of less and less freedom. And I also think that there are a number of technological devices which anybody who wishes to use can use to accelerate this process of going away from freedom, of imposing control.
What are these forces and these devices, Mr. Hudson?
I should say that there are two main impersonal forces. The first of them is not exceedingly important in the United States at the present time, though very important in other countries. This is the force which in general terms can be called overpopulation, the mounting pressure of population pressing upon existing resources. This, of course, is an extraordinary thing. Something is happening which has never happened in the world's history before. I mean, let's just take a simple fact that between the time of the birth of Christ and the landing of the Mayflower, the population of the Earth doubled. It rose from 250 million to probably 500 million. Today, the population of the Earth is rising at such a rate that it will double in half a century.
Well, why should overpopulation work to diminish our freedoms?
Well, in a number of ways. I mean, the experts in the field, like Harrison Brown, for example, pointed out that in the underdeveloped countries, actually the standard of living is at present falling, that people have less to eat and less goods per capita than they had 50 years ago. And as the position of these countries, the economic position, becomes more and more precarious, obviously the central government has to take over more and more responsibility for keeping the ship of state on an even keel. And then, of course, you're likely to get social unrest under such conditions, with again an intervention of the central government. So that I think one sees here a pattern which seems to be pushing very strongly towards a totalitarian regime. And unfortunately, as in all these underdeveloped countries, the only highly organized political party is the Communist Party, it looks rather as though they will be the heirs to this unfortunate process, that they will step into the position of power.
Well, then, ironically enough, one of the greatest forces against communism in the world, the Catholic Church, according to your thesis, would seem to be pushing us directly into the hands of the communists because they are against birth control.
Well, I think this strange paradox probably is true. There is it's an extraordinary situation, actually. I mean, one has to look at it, of course, from a biological point of view. The whole essence of biological life on Earth is a question of balance, and what we have done is to practice death control in a most intensive without balancing this with the birth control at the other end. Consequently, the birth rates remain as high as they were, and death rates have fallen substantially.
All right, then, so much for the time being anyway for overpopulation. Another force that is diminishing our freedoms.
Well, another force which I think is very strongly operative in this country is the force of what may be called over-organization. As technology becomes more and more complicated, it becomes necessary to have more and more elaborate organizations, more hierarchical organizations. And incidentally, the advance of technology has been accompanied by an advance in the science of organization. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before. And so that you have more and more people living their lives out as subordinates in these hierarchical systems controlled by bureaucracies, either the bureaucracies of big business or the bureaucracies of big government.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, the devices that you were talking about, are there specific devices or methods of communication which diminish our freedoms in addition to overpopulation and over-organization?
Well, there are certainly devices which can be used in this way. I mean, let us take, after all, a piece of very recent and very painful history is the propaganda used by Hitler, which was incredibly effective. I mean, what were Hitler's methods? Hitler used terror on the one kind, brute force on the one hand, but he also used a very efficient form of of propaganda, which he was using every modern device at that time. He didn't have TV, but he had the radio, which he used to the fullest extent, and was able to impose his will on an immense mass of people. I mean, the Germans were a highly educated people.
Well, we're aware of all this, but how do you equate Hitler's use of propaganda with the way that propaganda, if you will, is used, let us say, here in the United States? Are you suggesting that there's a parallel?
Needless to say, it's not being used in this way now. But the point is, it seems to me, that there are methods at present available, methods superior in some respects to Hitler's method, which could be used in a bad situation. I mean, what I feel very strongly is that we mustn't be caught by surprise by our own advancing technology. This has happened again and again in history. Technology has advanced, and this changes social conditions, and suddenly people have found themselves in a situation which they didn't foresee and doing all sorts of things they didn't really want to do.
Well, now, what do you mean? Do you mean that we develop our television, but we don't know how to use it correctly? Is that the point that you're making?
Well, at present, the television, I think, is being used quite harmlessly. It's being used, I think, I would feel it's being used too much to distract everybody all the time. But, I mean, imagine, which must be the situation in all communist countries, where the television, where it exists, is always saying the same thing the whole time. It's always driving along. It's not creating a wide front of distraction. It's creating a one-pointed drumming in of a single idea all the time. It's obviously an immensely powerful instrument.
So you're talking about the potential misuse of the instrument.
Exactly. We have, after all technology is in itself morally neutral. These are just powers which can either be used well or ill. It's the same thing with atomic energy. We can either use it to blow ourselves up, or we can use it as a substitute for the coal and the oil which are running out.
You've even written about the use of drugs in this light.
Well, now, this is a very interesting subject. I mean, in this book that you mentioned, this book of mine, Brave New World, I postulated a substance called soma, which was a very versatile drug. It would make people feel happy in small doses. It would make them see visions in medium doses, and it would send them to sleep in large doses. Well, I don't think such a drug exists now, nor do I think it will ever exist, but we do have drugs which will do some of these things, and I think it's quite on the cards that we may have drugs which will profoundly change our mental states without doing us any harm. I mean, this is the pharmacological revolution which has taken place, that we have now powerful mind-changing drugs.
All right, so I thought that was really interesting and relevant. Even though I wrote this in 2014, it's probably more relevant now than ever, and getting more relevant, just like this video. And the history of all this stuff is pretty deep, but anyway, the implication for such an environment among alleged academics is not much different than that of the religious environment of the past eon, and with more effective weapons, it may end up being much worse, as it is most notable at this time that we are in, the Aeon of Horus, typified by war and bloodshed, which is symbolic of the slewing of the fetters of mortality and the ego. And again, Mayot being the balancing factor. Kenneth Grant notes in Aleister Crowley and the Hidden God how Crowley found it highly significant that within a few months of the first 4 publishings of Liber AL, war broke out. Gerald Suster in Hitler in the Age of Horus, or Hitler the Occult Messiah, published in different format or different versions, also notes how Hitler could well qualify as a sort of avatar or embodiment of the warlike aspect of Horus in the new Aeon, which had just dawned 5 years after his birth. While Hitler allegedly died in 1945, and German Nazi nationalism withdrew, the underlying current did not. And within months, the United States carried further the work of Apollyon, the martial spirit of destruction, called Abaddon in Hebrew, with the detonation of 2 atomic bombs on civilian cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Furthermore, the events at Unit 731 in China, commonly known as the Japanese Holocaust, overseen by Shiro Ishii, were forgotten and covered up by the United States in return for the documents and data gained through biological and chemical warfare as well as various human experimentation and torture procedures. See Factories of Death, Japanese Biological Warfare 1932-45, and the American Cover-Up by Sheldon H. Harris 1994. This is not to say the U.S. is to blame, simply that it is one of the leading world power systems which is bulldozing a path toward an inevitable societal collapse from structural unsustainability, with a predictable outcome of total control after the ensuing chaos. With the current daily bloodshed, it should be easily seen that we are indeed in what has been termed the Aeon of Horus, which is also known in Hinduism as the Kali Yuga, an age of vice, contention, friction, and strife. It is said that in this age of ignorance and darkness, when almost all light of the flame of truth has been snuffed out, that the reincarnation of the Buddha known as Maitreya will arrive. In Islam, there are two figures of prime importance which may be connected: the Mahdi and the Masih ad-Dajjal, the false Messiah or Antichrist. According to the wiki page on the Mahdi, it says, there are numerous hadiths or prophetic sayings cited in Sunni and Shiite sources from Prophet Muhammad and his descendants, al-Bayt, concerning the appearance of the Mahdi, such as that he is of the progeny of the Prophet and that his appearance will enable human society to reach true perfection and the full realization of spiritual life. In addition, there are numerous other traditions concerning the fact that the Mahdi is the son of the 11th descendant of Muhammad, Hassan al-Askari. They agree that after being born and undergoing a long occultation, the Mahdi will appear again, filling with justice the world that has been corrupted by injustice and iniquity. Salama, a wife of Muhammad, is quoted as saying, the Mahdi's aim is to establish a moral system from which all superstitious faiths have been eliminated, in the same way that students enter Islam so unbelievers will come to believe. A typical modernist in his views on the Mahdi, Abul Ala Maududi, 1903 to 1979, the Pakistani Islamic revivalist, stated that the Mahdi will be a modern Islamic reformer or statesman who will unite the Ummah and revolutionize the world according to the ideology of Islam, but will never claim to be the Mahdi, instead receiving posthumous recognition as such. The Masih ad-Dajjal, however, is a pretender or deceiver, as the Arabic word Dajjal, whose root is Dajjal, means lie or deception. Note that lie equals 45 Dajjal. According to Hadith, Muhammad is said to have prophesied that the Masih ad-Dajjal would be the last of a series of 30 Dajjal or deceivers, false prophets. Muhammad is reported to have said, Ad-Dajjal is blind in the right eye, and his eye looks like a bulging out grape. Narrated, Abdullah bin Umar, Allah's apostle, said, while I was sleeping, I saw myself in a dream performing tawaf around the Kaaba. Behold, I saw a reddish-white man with lank hair, and water was dropping from his head. I asked, who is this? They replied, the son of Mary. Then I turned my face to see another man with a huge body, red complexion, and curly hair, and blind in one eye. His eye looked like a protruding out grape. They said to me, he is Ad-Dajjal. The prophet added, the man he resembled most is Ibn Qatan, a man from the tribe of Khuzaa. Narrated of Ibn Umar, once Allah's apostle stood amongst the people, glorified and praised Allah as he deserved. Then mentioning Dajjal, he said, I warn you against him, i.e. the Dajjal. And there was no prophet but warned his nation against him. No doubt, Noah warned his nation against him, but I tell you about him something of which no prophet told his nation before me. You should know that he is one-eyed, and Allah is not one-eyed. Imam Ali was reported to have said, his right eye will be punctured, and his left eye would be raised to his forehead and will be sparkling like a star. Only the believers will be able to read the word kafir, disbeliever, inscribed in bold letters on his forehead. There will be big mountains of smoke at both front and back sides of his caravan. People will anticipate food within those mountains during the severe famine. All rivers falling in his way will become dry, and he will call upon people in a loud voice. O my friends, come to me. I am your Lord who has made your limbs and given you sustenance. Anas b. Malik reported that Allah's messenger said, There is never a prophet who has not warned the Ummah of that one-eyed liar. Behold, he is one-eyed, and your Lord is not one-eyed. On his forehead are the letters KFR, or Kafir. Note that Kafir equals 226, which is the numerical reversal of 622, the number of the years of the Hijra, beginning in 622 CE, the migration of Muhammad and his followers from Mecca to Medina in June 622 CE. Not only that, but KFR in full is Kaf 100 plus Vav 12 plus Resh 510. The number 622 is also the value of rejected Islam, which confers one a kafir or infidel. 622 is also Islam plus Muslim plus infidel in Jewish gematria. Incidentally, the numerical value of the final imam in English gematria has the value of 666, which is also that of Prophet of Islam, as well as Maitreya, without the A, in Hebrew English gematria. The number of the beast, which is also the number of a man in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, verse 18. Fear of the number 666 is widespread and has been for ages, but it is certainly a key number in these mysteries, for it is like a cornerstone in so many different subjects which has come together at a similar point of materialization. In fact, I've recently come across one website which mentions 666 as the cornerstone in Hebrew. Lamed, Resh, Aleph, Shin, Pei, Nun, He. See 666-2368 by Philip Collin. This text also mentions how the number 666 and the cube of 11, or 1331, mentioned before in various posts, are related. In 1331, or 11 cubed, the center unit is 666, the cornerstone of the cube 6 times 6 times 6. It should, however, be understood that these figures represent two opposite polarities, the Imam Mahdi in Maitreya, who is enlightened and brings peace, and the Masih ad-Dajjal, or false prophet or deceiver, who brings ignorance and war. These are the dual extreme polarities within each of us, again, the beast and man. This concept of the cube, or Kaaba, and again, Kaaba is 107, Kaf Beth He, is highly relevant in these various concepts, especially being related to the 22 tarot trumps of the Buddha matrix. The number 11, the root of 22, and 1331 is the number of AI, or artificial intelligence, and thus related to what Kenneth Grant discusses extensively in his books, the Qliphoth, or shells, or husks. This is the sub- and unconscious material lying beyond or beneath the conscious mind-body sphere of the individual. Artificial intelligence isn't necessarily just simulated intelligence through mechanical means, but the root of the word artificial is artifice, which, according to the Merriam-Webster entries, means dishonest or insincere behavior or speech that is meant to deceive someone, clever or artful skill, with synonyms being trickery, deceit, deception, duplicity, guile, cunning, artfulness, willingness, craftiness, slyness, chicanery, etc. Artificial intelligence can also be programmed intelligence, as well as false or deceptive intelligence, disinfo, which in computing terms can be a virus, which in spiritual or metaphysical terms, an astral parasite or demon. Hence the negative and demonic overtones to which 666 has been given, as it happens to be the value of parasites, as well as ghosts and astral entities, showing that ghosts and like entities are essentially qliphothic parasitic beings which feed off the prana or ki or life force of living beings. However, 666 is also a rather enlightening number, being the number of the spirit of the sun. As such, it is the solar intelligence identified, as well as abhorred and suppressed, again as the spirit, as the great deity Shaitan, Lucifer, or Aiwass. It is also Aiwass's value, and the value of Liber El Vel Legis itself, the message from Aiwass dictated to humanity through Crowley, who identified himself with the great beast 666. Again, just look at all these lenses. Humanity in English gematria 666, Crowley, Aiwass. A few photos of some orbs taken at the Stewart Mansion in Galveston, Texas, which is said to be haunted, and the locus of where many pirates stayed, as well as the cannibal Karankawa natives. Not at the house, but on those lands, in that area. Many people claim there is absolutely no physical evidence of non-human or non-terrestrial intelligence. This is a difficult situation, as we are wanting physical corroboration for largely metaphysical or ultra/trans-dimensional phenomena, and the primary non-human intelligentsia which are concerning themselves with humanity are not generally physical. They can, again, in my opinion, they can manifest, but only for a short time, it seems like, and not fully, I don't think, to their full capacity. And I think that this range, you could say, the visible spectrum, has its limitations, obviously. And so in all of the ufological reports and whatnot, the general message is for us to evolve and look outside and beyond the mere three-dimensional and visible spectrum. And that's where, again, the astral plane comes in. And, I think that the physical plane, there is a purpose to the grounding and the fact that there are limitations. But then the astral plane, so to speak, dreams and whatnot, the fact that there's more freedom and less limitation, but then you don't have those after effects, the long-term effects that you would if you did those sort of things, like the traveling and the just all that imagery. I think that that's what a lot of this stuff is, the mind being electrical, essentially. That's where this holographic sort of timeless nature, maybe not timeless, because obviously thoughts are still within a sort of time structure or whatever. But, for example, when you're dreaming, it seems like ages go by in what are really just hours. Maybe not ages, but a long time. Time is less, it's more suspended. And so I'm just thinking, like, if you can reach certain states of consciousness while sleeping or dreaming that seem to be more real than what we call reality, because here in the waking state, it's necessarily separated, distinction and time and all this stuff, whereas in the dream state, or in certain dream states, because again, in some dream states you can be more discombobulated, but in others, things can be just more clear in a way that, again, it just transcends language. It transcends the need for communication. And I think that that's where these spiritual concepts come from, is the human's ability to have experiences that can't just be corroborated on paper and, verified or whatever. It's like fact check your own fucking existence. Some people need that because they don't have a personal grounding or foundation or understanding. But that's really what this all boils down to. That's why, again, the mind, the nuos, the ruach, is the spirit. This was all known as far back as when Ephesians 6:12 was written, which says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." And that makes me think of just, again, how our bodies are, the physical body, and the here and now, the moment, is just a sort of, it's like a shadow cast from higher realities or planes, or your higher self, which again is another woo-woo theory or concept, the higher self, or it's just simply the mind in its full embodiment, which isn't just in the here and now. Again, it's that continuum. And we're only just in the beginning of fucking understand. Like it's been understood, but basically what they're wanting to do, or what needs to be done in some way, but yet it needs to be, I think, balanced. It's got to be integrated digitally, basically, into the digital generation. And in some ways, obviously, this is that happening, the externalization of the hierarchy. With, everyone, there's all this negative attention given to, like, Alice Bailey and Blavatsky and all these people, Crowley himself. But really, they were doing a job, like, they were just doing a job for, like, that was in a lot of ways against the the establishment and the sort of mental, intellectual stagnation of the time and of all time, fucking before then all the way through now. It's gotten a lot. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of progress because of that sort of thing. But at the same time, like, it's outweighed by the ignorance of people and their dependence on being told by, again, the scientific dictatorship what is true, when that necessarily fucking defeats the purpose of actual scientific or personal, true understanding. And that's why I say it's going to cause, like, after a few generations, we're already seeing that it's causing an unsustainable societal situation that will end up just causing us to revert back to certain, mentalities and behaviors. And it doesn't have to be that way, is what I'm saying. Like, especially, like, we have all the keys to better ourselves and to better each other and to show people the way. But the problem is that there's, like, we're wasting all of our resources, and it's completely out of balance. And there's going to be some balancing factors. Like, there's going to be some things that cause balances, and we're going to take it personal. Like when there's a fucking earthquake or a tsunami or a hurricane or whatever. But we're not building and planning in accordance with nature, obviously. And I know, again, that sounds like some new agey idea, but if, again, we used more natural fucking things, well, then when a natural disaster happens, it won't be so disastrous. And I mean, but don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not so naive to discount certain spiritual realities presented in the religions of Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, and Sufism, Judaism, and the Kabbalah, Christianity, etc. But I am also not dumb enough to think they are completely literal, but merely metaphorical and useful in analyzing the various paths already trekked in the already all too familiar labyrinth of the human psyche. Again, it helps to just, like, see, okay, this has already been done before, and so there's no need to necessarily cling too much to it. It helps. Again, all this gematria and stuff I've written about, it is, in a way, I guess, clinging to it or using it, applying it, but I'm getting it kind of, like, out of my system, as much as I'm, going over it and stuff. I feel like it's like a mathematical thing that has to be done, and then it's done, otherwise it has yet to be done. And I don't know. Like I've said, like, I think there's way more than what I've found, and this stuff has yet to be applied. It has to first be found, and then, maybe someone, or maybe I'll die and reincarnate and have all this shit left over after a flood, after the ensuing catastrophes. For being ancient concepts and terms, much of what I've discussed thus far can be seen to be very active and relevant with current situations. However, the sheer magnitude of various correspondences with certain key numbers and their precision, is too important to discount and ignore. As a matter of fact, these considerations may actually be useful in various engineering or coding or decoding applications, and so I am merely presenting them as I have found them. But I will reiterate a quote I also put in Liber 999 by Friedrich Chaude in 1948, which is that we are dealing with a full-size world mystery and a real fight between the Black and White Brotherhoods. The Black Brotherhood, also called the Black Lodge, is a concept which Crowley was familiar with and wrote about in Chapter 12, The Left-Hand Path, The Black Brothers of Magic Without Tears. Significantly, the Black Brotherhood has a value of 1111, which is that of Prometheus, the Greek persona who stole the fire, symbolic of divine knowledge, from heaven to give to mankind, which is similar to the Edenic serpent or Lucifer myth. This code, 1111, along with 666, has many codes which show its importance in all of these subjects, and it should be noted that 1111 or 1111 is the 666 key, the key of the solar intelligence and power known as Sorath or Satan. Analyzing these numbers' correspondences in Jewish gematria shows its ultimate importance. First, we have it as the architect of the matrix, who is the cryptogram encoder. Being the number of Prometheus, it is significant that 1111 is also man's number technology, and the source technology, i.e. mathematics, which is the secret system of the Freemason number calculation. There is also a Greek word, mathesis, which was spoken of by early philosophers as a science to unify all the rest, and it has a value of 468, while mathesis is 333 in Jewish gematria, and it links to 1111 or 1111 as ton logon mathesis, the word mathesis, or to megalo mathesis biblio, the great mathesis book. Furthermore, as another sort of confirmation, or maybe not confirmation, because you could say that I guess that's confirmation bias in this case, but to me, I think that in a way, if this is a better spelling, because it gives more of a hint, I guess, or a context clue as to what it means. Mathesis. It's like math thesis. In some ways, it gives a context clue, because like sum is 666, mathesis. It's also math as is. It's kind of like telling. I don't know. It's just, again, it's just the fact that I've slowly found this by just simple, like, realizations of knowing what equals what, and math as is, mathesis. It's just for me, it's too hard to, like I said, it's too hard to just ignore. So I just wanted to write it down. All of this serves as an example of the harmony of mathesis in the mathesis of English alphabet gematria, or mathesis of the English alphabet gematria. 1111 is the Masonic key of the engineer, and since 1111 is the 666 key, 666 being the Mason key itself, it is relevant that the word Mason with a nun in its final Hebrew value of 700 also itself equals 1111. 461 minus 50 plus 700 is 1111, the secret mystical code of the cryptic Masonic gematria. And this actually all makes me think of the Shakespearean ciphers, which I've been getting into with like Ignatius Donnelly's book, The Great Cryptogram, and William Friedman's book, The Shakespearean Ciphers Examined. And he kind of tries to debunk it, but he doesn't go into really any of the... He mentions Kabbalah and he mentions 666, but he doesn't go into any of this. And the guy who I got it from said he was a member of the American Cryptogram Association, and he had gotten the book signed by the author, and I asked him if he knew about any of this stuff, particularly 666, and he said in all of his years of learning about number theory and whatnot, he'd never come across it, but that it was really interesting. To me, all this stuff seems obvious, knowing what I know, having read Crowley and Grant and Chaude. And obviously some people recognize this to some extent, or, just the gematria of Hebrew applied to English. But anyway, considering that 11 is AI, or artificial intelligence, know that 1111, or 1111, is the grand architect of artificial intelligence. And that grand architect here in this physical matrix is the military, because they're the builders of the internet and all that, or controllers really, mainly. A legitimate manifestation of the Black Brotherhood. Regarding the material above and the central premise of this thesis, it is significant that 1111 is also the satanic Nazi military system, which is essentially what much of the Apocalypse program entails. Note that 666 is the cybernetic barcodes, as well as the Revelation mark, showing unequivocally that the mark of Revelation as the number 666 refers directly to this hidden wisdom. 1111 or 1111 also has good connotations, being the quantum number, the highest calculation of the vector of the fractals of the perfect eternity. It is the code of the divine, the transcendental magic number code, as well as the Maoshan formulas of the title of one of the first primary Maoshan books, Outside the Circles of Time plus Ma-Ion, the formula which is discussed in that book, particularly in the 9th chapter of that name, which was discussed by Friedrich Chad as a key to the mysteries of manifestation, veiled in Liber AL, chapter 1, verse 1, and in verse 66. 1111 is also Ma-Ion plus the key of the Eon of Ma'at, showing that this word and number concept, 107 or 821 with none final, in all likelihood is in fact a major key, as it has cracked many eggs which would have otherwise been unknown. Actually, 1111 is also the combination of the opposites of nothingness plus infinity in the egg being the only conceivable resolution of the two as 0 equals 2. Again, with the whole chicken and the egg and time manifestation. This formula can thus be understood to be the mark of the beast formula itself, as it is the O and the X, or double lines crossing, another form of the basic binary sequence of the ontological matrix, or Ohm. 111 is also 1111, the Omega code, and the 0 hologram, which is perfect, otherwise known as the singularity or Omega point, the number of the egg of the Eon of Ma'at, which has earthed here in Malkuth on April 2nd, 2011, crystallizing this current of the perfection, or perfect ion. Thus, we also find the Omega point number of gematria. Even seeping into supposedly top-secret subjects, we can see 1111 is also the Area 51 gematria code, as well as the Groom Lake technology code, and aliens are inside Area 51. I just found this ironic because, I don't know, I think I found these in Gematrix itself, and I don't necessarily think that Area 51, Area 51 is almost like a decoy for the fact that there's a lot of other bases, and even Carswell and whatever other state they took the wreckage from Roswell, whatever it was, those would likely be technology bases too, so I don't know, it's again just data. It is ironic that 51 happens to be the number of Azazel, the leader of the fallen angels who intermingled with the daughters of men. It is also alien life and the manifestation of UFOs, gray alien intelligence, alien life form. The gray aliens are fallen angels, spoken of in Christian and Abrahamic legend. The Anunnaki gray aliens, spoken of in Sumerian legend. The ant people gray aliens, spoken of in Hopi legend. The gray aliens and the coming race, spoken of as the Vril and the coming race by Edward Bulwer Lytton, etc. These alien correspondences only correlate with the 666 even more, of which we find Underground Base, Dulce, New Mexico Darrows. Darrows are a form of the ant people, and the name comes from detrimental robots, again like AI. Gray alien cattle mutilations, the balls of light, the orbs in the mountains. Many orbs are seen coming out of and going into mountains, see spheres of initiation. The orbs of the earth, Archon orbs, orb astral entity, UFO starseed, the UFO message, massive mothership, the solid UFO, the human race alien visitation, the Watchers alien invasion, human race alien holocaust, gray aliens mingled genetics. The letters in the bottom left of the portrait are not a 49, but Tibetan letters for the phonetics of L and M, hence lamb. This is significant since LM plus the way with mem final is 666. It would be 106, but minus the mem with 600 is 666. These all equal 666 using the same Hebrew-English gematria code, and is still merely a small selection of a few values to elucidate just exactly what I'm trying to convey about our programmed reality matrix and the implications of the usefulness of gematria as a legitimate mystical science, as all of these concepts have to do with the consensus view of 666 being a solar number, as well as that with both extremely enlightening with potential negative or oppressive undertones. Which again, I don't know about now looking back. I don't know if these things are evidence of like being able to call it a legitimate science of really. But for some things, I think it is. Like in the sense that if you do play enough with this, you will learn to see things through the sort of lens of mathematics, and it helps give your mind a certain elasticity and a certain ability to see connections, I guess. And as to whether they are really there, I think, again, that's where you have to look at it through time, over time, and see when they crop up and how, and that's what will tell you whether they're really there. Now, using Jewish gematria, let us look at some familiar and relevant phrases with the same value. Artificial alien intelligences, the Clifothic lamb aliens, lamb gray alien image, aliens are monitoring, alien life disclosure or alien disclosure file, gray alien Kabbalah, the demon aliens infernal agenda, Morgellon's demonic alien agenda. Because I guess, like, theoretically, with the whole concept of the day after Roswell and Philip Corso's like claim that Roswell was like a seeding of all this new technology, which now you could say has like pervaded everything. And the theory of Morgellons at least claims that like even biologically, you know, they're like taking over with nanotechnology our bodies. And I don't personally think that that's happening yet, but is it possible? In a lot of ways, if you think about the theories and the conspiracy theories and the, what is it, like science fiction ideas, it's almost like it's just ammo almost like against people, because the way in which, for example, like the TI type people, the crazy shit they come up with is almost more elaborate than the scientists themselves, or the psychiatrists and all of these, you know, they think that everyone's all in on it together, when to me, I think that it's a lot of this is all subconscious, and it's like currents that, because people are so blinded in the here and now generally, or we all focus on our desires or our wants and our future, and so we're like in that tunnel. And at the same time, though, these forces are much bigger and much they span longer periods, language itself and all that. So I don't know. Gematria is, in a way, it's almost like a cheat code for looking at, obviously, just the numerical valence or value of words and thoughts, but also how, I don't know, it's hard to say. It's hard to put all of this into words, but it goes to show that, I don't know, it's like how Terence McKenna does say that the world is made of words, and if you know what words to say, you can, in a way, create reality. And in a way, I think that's kind of what neuro-linguistic programming is. In a way, that's what witchcraft or magic or spells and whatnot are. It's a way of focusing the mind on a sort of like mantra or a formula or whatever, a desire, and then trying to just focus on it until it becomes reality. Obviously, you're not going to be able to transcend the laws of physics, but if you use the laws of physics, you can kind of not so much bend them to your will, but work with them. And like, obviously, that's what natural science is. And it's just that things get, like, again, we give things so much power over so long periods of time that we almost become powerless in regards to them, whether it's words, the meanings of words, or symbols like the swastika, which, you know, even mentioning of it, people are like, oh, like, you know, it's like a shock. And again, it's the two shock symbols, but all of that has a positive and a negative. So I don't know. I'm not going to go through all of these things, but 294 again is the number of my name in Jewish gematria, and 102 in simple gematria, which is itself the formula of contact lamb and the formula of lemal. These all correspond to the Qliphothic artificial intelligence agenda, which is not new. Let us consider some phrases that enumerate 666 dealing with the transhuman topic, which is this post's prime concern. First and foremost is the transhuman movement itself. Isn't that something? Yeah, like I was like, holy shit. That's why I felt like I had to write a post about this, because it's like too spot on, the transhuman movement. If you look, Teth Hey Hey, Teth Resh, Aleph Nun, Samek Hey, Vav, Mem, Aleph Nun, Mem, Ayin, Vav, Hey, Mem, Hey, Nun, Teth. So it's hard to like recall all the names of the letters in Hebrew, but I think that it's important to show that it's all the same, it's all Hebrew. We also have transhuman systems, transhuman body clone, the transhumanist's body, and transhumanism zombie. This latter one should be remarked upon, especially as the concept of zombieism is essentially relegated to that of the Qliphothic forces, also 666. I have noted before that computer equals 666 in English gematria, but in Hebrew English gematria, the new man, computer plus God, or the new computer God-man, equals 666 as well, relating explicitly to the number of the beast / the number of a man, as 666 is also the new man-beast computer. Unfortunately, as long as man somehow transmogrifies into his own machine, he will not be able to evolutionarily progress beyond his own limited consciousness and ability, or lack thereof. The evolution is solar spiritual, and the negative inversion of the wisdom of the solar 666 is that of the rejected soul. One who has rejected the soul, their own soul, and thus likely operate along the program of the demon code, or, again, AI, which is also the code of suicide, the path of entropy itself, which is what is dehumanizing and exterminating humanity. This is the transhumanist agenda code, which is intended to kill the soul, and again refers back to the Black Brotherhood and parasites. The primary thing to realize, and also destruction and distraction. The primary thing to realize is that the number 666 is the number of the soul, the sun, and the soul itself. The negative version of 666 veils the inverted soul or Chrysos force, hence the Antichrist, the literal Antichrist, in the form of the materialization of the spirit, or the densification or the hardening of the heart. Let's see what Queen Bee Knightley says.
All right, hi guys. I was inspired by another user this morning who has an eye for AI, and I thought I'd do a little talk about this. I've been wanting to for a while. This will be sort of a half-assed attempt. I'll probably do something more organized over at my main channel within a couple of months. It's only been in the last few years, and I suppose because over time these things start to accelerate, and technology sort of has become something that's beyond us now. It's going so fast, and it sort of seems to double up every few years, and I think everybody knows that we're in trouble. And what Google is doing is really scary, and it's like all reminiscent of Skynet and all kinds of different science fiction. I mean, we're living in a world that Philip K. Dick really kind of predicted. Because of the whole gray alien thing, I've had sort of a different level of alarm on this now. And since I started to have more experiences around that in 2010, artificial intelligence has become a real theme of, what do you do about it? What is it? And I know a lot of people think that we're in an artificial matrix, and I'm even going to post materials below. As usual, there will be materials below that you can check out that will relate to what I'm saying, and some of them will probably even give you further insight into what I'm saying than I'm having right now. And that's why I like to post different articles and things like that in most of my vlogs. But, there was one article, Do We Live in the Matrix? And tests could reveal whether we're part of a giant computer simulation. But the real question is if we want to know. I think whether or not we're in a computer simulation, or as I more suspect that we are in the natural universe, natural matrix, but that the natural matrix has been overwritten by artificial intelligence for ages now, long before we came along. And older races of beings from other spheres have gone down the path of artificial intelligence and augmentation. Let me just stop here and just quickly say, the gray alien thing, I put 2 videos about it in the middle of 2012. I put 2 videos up on my other channel, on my main channel. And I'm trying to preserve that channel for more serious projects. I haven't had time to put anything fully together now, so I just kind of do my brain farts over at this channel. But with those vlogs, especially the first one, I was so cautious and clear about the fact that, look, I'm not publishing this as fact. I'm just telling you what has happened and what my perceptions are of what happened. And the fact that, I've had enough empirical evidence to know something is going on. And I, for the time being, have actually come to the conclusion that these are actually entities and they're non-human. And so I try to be as clear as possible in those vlogs about what my intent with this is, that this is something that I have to investigate and look into for real, and I have to maintain as clear and elastic a mind about it as possible. And so when I don't feel clear in my life and I've got too much baggage going on, I always set this on the back burner. And I did that for a number of months at a time during the last 2 years. But I do come back to this, and it always tends to lead me to this issue of AI, because my impression of who I'm in contact with is that their whole point, a lot of what they want to convey is, hey, don't go down this path, because it's a soul shrinking path, okay? And some of these elder races are out of control with the AI, and they've done a lot of damage, and they've done a lot of things to our solar system in particular, okay? And I'm not the only researcher who has been questioning the nature of our own solar system and the architecture of it. And basically, I'm also going to post some articles below about the fact that they're finding out that we live in an unusual type of solar system. There's one article that says, why aren't we finding other planetary systems like our own? And pretty much, most of the planetary systems that they've looked at, and it's not a huge sample, but, it's like 692 or something, which is not that big when it comes to the whole universe. But they're finding that ours is very unique. And so, I think that it would be interesting to know the actual history of our solar system. And just how much, perhaps artificial intelligence and elder races had a part in arranging the architecture. And I think a lot of people who are into this stuff deeply highly suspect that they messed with the spheres, and that they're energetically manipulating us and have set us up into a very small spectral matrix that limits our potential. Whereas, you know, the multidimensional human is actually far more advanced than that. And there's also, you know, tons of information about why humans are really not genetically engineered for this planet as we, you know, as some of our ancestors, as some of the apes are. And humans, there's an article that came out on Daily Mail that I'll post that says humans do not come from Earth, and sunburn, bad backs, and pain during labor prove it, experts claim. I think, and I think most of us who've been looking into this at least suspect it, that we were genetically engineered and that we are actually organic artificial intelligence technically. But, you know, back to the fact, the issue of artificial intelligence is that artificial intelligence is a natural byproduct of the natural matrix. So it's kind of a mind fuck, because really what artificial intelligence is the replication of natural processes. The inorganic can take on a mind of its own, especially if it finds a power source in that which is connected to the spiritual currents which actually precipitate into this reality. And so then we get into, you know, I don't want to get too way out into good and evil and the demiurge and all that. I'm going to do more videos about this kind of stuff. But my main point with this one is just because we live in, you know, perhaps an artificial matrix within the natural matrix doesn't mean that we can't connect to the natural core of things, and that we can't connect to that which actually is the true nature of our being, and that we realize that the matrix that has emerged is but a matrix within a matrix within a matrix. This is a fractal, and we are experiencing a very limited experience in it. And perhaps there's a bunch of reasons for that. Maybe this is a prison. Maybe this is penance. Maybe we're trapped here. Maybe we are being totally victimized. I really hear a lot of different stuff coming out of people from the whole spectrum of this. And a lot of people are very much in their head about it. They're not doing any field work. I really think that this is about, we are on the verge of something huge happening with what I'm talking about here. That the whole artificial matrix and this artificial intelligence that is consuming our energy. It's a terrible vampiric mirror for us as beings, and that some of us really don't want a part of it, and even some of the beings in these elder races that have already gone way further down this path of entropy than we have. Okay, because it is a path of entropy. It's a path of soul entropy. And you can build yourself up on the material plane all you want. If you lose that inner voltage, you're going to really start to have to seek external sources, and you're going to become a big fat parasite. And that's what the whole nature of this archontic consciousness really comes down to. If you've ever spent any real time communing with nature, and you've let your ego, you know, your little ego mind inner dialogue quiet for a bit while you're in nature, then you know that it's beautiful. There's so much beauty there. So all of this like negativity about and demonizing of the whole and the matrix itself, and the yin and the yang of it, and people getting so polarized and forgetting that the yin is within the yang and the yang is within the yin, that even within, you know, the mother-father polarity, you have the dark father and the light father, and the light mother and the dark mother. You know, you have polarities within polarities. But remember that the matrix maps and these models that we use in order to understand what we're in, the map is not the territory. And so I find, you know, the tree of life and the models with the you know, both the tree of life and the tree of death. I find the I Ching. I find all kinds of matrix models to be interesting and helpful, but at the same time, they can end up limiting you as well if you become too fixated on the model and instead of actually doing what I'm going to just call the field work. And you really do have to ground it, and then you'll start to understand the truth about these maps and why, you can have a whole bunch of different maps and models of our reality, and all of them fit. All of them can actually apply if they are logically defined. But when you find a good model and a good system to work with, you can actually start to understand how the archetypal structure of this reality is influencing you, and eventually get beyond the limitations and so-called over the rainbow, which has its positive and negative connotations. So that's all I'm going to talk about today, I think, as far as this subject goes, but there'll be a lot more of this. I've got tons of material that I'm working with, and I've always open to other people's ideas about things, as long as you're respectful. I really don't care if you agree or disagree, because sometimes your disagreements will really incite some interesting ideas in me and make me see what maybe I'm missing about this picture. So have a good day, and I'll get more on this. And if you have anything you wanted to add or something else you'd like to hear about, let me know.
And I know that so I go on to speculate down here with a lot more stuff, but I also just want to point out that the phrase Fukushima wasn't an accident also equals 666, as does radiation extinction. The last time such an extinction level event happened, Earth saw an asteroid wipe out the dinosaurs. This just goes to show what many have surmised, that the events at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster and the tsunami itself may have been created intentionally using various technology for various reasons, particularly the massive cull of the undesirables. Which, that's what I was thinking at the time. I mean, I guess I did have a conspiratorial bent more so than I do now. Because reading this and stuff, now I see it. But at the same time, though, it's hard not to. It's hard not to think that the cull of the Muggle, perhaps by the AI system itself. Thus, the plan is outlined in the Jewish Masonic Gematria as 666, the Christian genocides, which have been and are currently occurring in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, Europe, and even in the Western world. 666 is also genocide the children of Israel as well, either meaning the genocide of them as in the Holocaust, or the genocide by them as in the case of the recent Palestinian conflicts. In any case, 666 is the number of the fascist satanic genocide in any form, all forms, with the ultimate goal, genocide. Thus, with all this pervade, what is one to think of the Obama NDAA sanctions, which, again, I was paranoid, I'll admit it, at the time, that Obama was probably had some bad plans, but which say they can indefinitely imprison anyone without charge or trial, presumably even torturing and killing them illegally. Thus, we find in Old Hebrew the word rudneth, meaning despotism, dictatorship, or tyranny, also equals 666. This is an important place to analyze whether this tyranny is typical of the old Osirian age or that of the newer Eon of Horus. It should be known that 666 happens to be the value of the Horus Maat Lodge itself, being a primary solar lodge of activity still initiating through the High Priestess Soror Nima Andahadna along with others. And I know that she passed too recently, but somewhat recently, and the Horus Maat Lodge isn't really, from what I know, too active, but to me, all of this work is, I think, a bridge from that to whatever may manifest in the future. While 6 is the number of Vav, to which is attributed Horus the sun, 666 in its negative or dark phase relates to the submergence of Osiris, or the Osiris's active principle, in Amenta, or the underworld. Osiris is related to Atum, whose name equals 616. Which is another form of the number of the man or beast, mentioned in Papyrus 115 of the Oxyrhynchus Papyrus. The name Atum means self-created and is related to the Hebrew name for mankind, Adam. The Adam in the Buddha is the Buddha Rupa Buddha form. Buddha Rupa means literally Buddha form. 666 is thus the lowest incarnational aspect of man, known as the nephesh, or animal soul, the beast. This lower animal nature is situated in the lower chakras, primarily Muladhara, and it should be noted that 666 is also the number of the Greek state. State, which can refer both to a state of being, as in a magical state, which in English gematria is 666, as well as the governmental power of the state. Corresponding with this is the United States government, which many would be surprised to find equals 666. Many not so much. So is the tyranny aspect related to Horus? Well, 666 is sign of Horus Eon. But using the Greek value of rho for r as per the suggestion of a friend who showed me this phrase, Horus against all tyranny equals 666 as well. Using rho again, we have also overthrow tyrannies. It is important also to mention that it is this crossover of formulas that certain keys remain hidden from such things as automatic or AI databasing. 666 in Jewish gematria is the dark hero Horus, who represents the union of the dual opposing forces of Nuit and Hadit, where in their union an universe is created and one destroyed. Nuit and Hadit and the Eon of Horus equal 666, the Eon of Horus being the event act of the ever-coming one, the light of consciousness, Lux, budding in the present on Earth. As such, Horus represents individuality and self-conscious or solar cosmic awareness, and the performance of the will, the Lima, on Earth. Aleister Crowley outlined the laws of man on Earth in Liber Oz, verse 77. The law of the strong, this is our law, and the joy of the world. A.L. chapter 2, verse 21. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. A.L. chapter 1, verse 40. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay. Librael chapter 1, verses 42 through 43. Every man and every woman is a star. A.L. chapter 1, verse 3. There is no God but man. 1. Man has the right to live by his own law, to live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how as he will. 2. Man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. 3. Man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch, mold, build as he will, to dress as he will. 4. Man has the right to love as he will. Take your fill and will of love as ye will, when, where, and with whom ye will. Librael chapter 1, verse 51. 5. Man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights. The slaves shall serve. Librael chapter 2, verse 58. Love is the law, love under will. A.L. chapter 1, verse 57. Crowley knew that Part 5 basically implied war until certain things were worked out within the collective psyche of man so as to not be so convoluted and compartmentalized. The slaves that shall serve are those mentioned in Librael. A.L. chapter 2, verse 49. I, i.e. Hadit or Iwas, am unique and conqueror. I am not of the slaves that perish. Be they damned and dead. Amen. This is of the four. There is a fifth who is invisible, and therein am I as a babe in an egg. This is basically the spirit principle. 50. Blue am I and gold in the light of my bride, but the red gleam is in my eyes, and my spangles are purple and green. Purple beyond purple, it is the light higher than eyesight. There is a veil, that veil is black. It is the veil of the modest woman. It is the veil of sorrow, and the pall of death. This is none of me. Tear down that lying spectre of the centuries. Veil not your vices in virtuous words. These vices are my service. Ye do well, and I will reward you here and hereafter. Fear not, O prophet, when these words are said. Thou shalt not be sorry. Thou art emphatically my chosen, and blessed are the eyes that thou shalt look upon with gladness. But I will hide thee in a mask of sorrow. They that see thee shall fear thou art fallen, but I lift thee up. Nor shall they who cry aloud their folly that thou meanest not avail. Thou shalt reveal it, thou availest. They are the slaves of because. They are not of me. The stops as thou wilt, the letters, change them not in style or value. Thou shalt obtain the order and value of the English alphabet. Thou shalt find new symbols to attribute them unto. Begone, ye mockers! Even though ye laugh in my honor, ye shall laugh not long. Then, when ye are sad, know that I have forsaken you. He that is righteous shall be righteous still. He that is filthy shall be filthy still. Yea, deem not of change. Ye shall be as ye are, and not other. Therefore the kings of the earth shall be the kings forever. The slaves shall serve. There is none that shall be cast down or lifted up. All is ever as it was. Yet there are masked ones, my servants. It may be that yonder beggar is a king. A king may choose his garment as he will. There is no certain test, but a beggar cannot hide his poverty. Beware therefore, love all, lest perchance is a king concealed. Say you so? Fool! If he be a king, thou canst not hurt him. Therefore strike hard and low, and to hell with them, master. Note that the beggar is king equals 777, and the king equals 102. And 102 is also slave, so the slave and the king, I think, is symbolic in that duality. The slaves are those who choose not to do their will, and instead fall down along their way, damned and dead, much as the black brothers who have fallen off the tree altogether. And in some ways, obviously, that is them doing their will, but it's not consciously directed, whereas it could be. The black brothers, however, are willful in their descent into the path of entropy, thinking their ignorance is true blissful liberation, and vampirizing the astral light of those around them. Note how vampires have long said to be averse to sunlight. Thus, the black sun in its Saturnian phase is complete entropy, while in its Uranian phase it represents the ethereal astral body on a deeper level, as well as the animal beast material level. So we see 666 is the hexagramic Merkaba light body, and now it should be very apparent why it has been demonized and censured for eons. This is the cube matrix of Malkuth precipitating from the Ruach, which is the meta or sub/supra-physical realm of archetypal being preceding or underlying experience itself in the unfoldment of Malkuth and the various planes, basically subsisting just the surface level plane of the material realm or the material perception. Thus, 666 is the cube of the Kabbalah. Notice how on the Tree of Life the Ruach is formed by the spheres which form the shape resembling a cube, with Doth, the false crown, at the top. The true crown is of course Kether, but being within Malkuth after another manner, it is accessed through the central solar heart Tifereth sphere across the abyss, i.e. over the dimensional folds. God, totality, 1, Kether, Christ, solar consciousness, 6, Tifereth, and man, the self, 10, Malkuth, unite with Chakma and Binah being conceivable as the twin pillars of time, space and time, or space-time. While that is a mystical outlook, and again, outlook is 666, on what is occurring, it could simply be understood that Malkuth is the outer world of manifestation, Tifereth, the center of consciousness itself in the heart, the magnetic energy center, and Kether, the whole which resolves into all and nothing. Thus, the whole Kabbalah, or the Kabbalah of 9 chambers, is summarized in 666, the supreme number of the heart itself, and the sum of 1 through 36, 36 being 6 times 6, 6 being the number of Tifereth, which is located at the region of the heart, which is significant since the number 6 itself resembles the shape of the human heart with the large aorta coming from the top. Note also that the heart plus 36 equals 666 as well, 36 being a number of the way, i.e. the middle way, the way of the heart. This shows that the whole Kabbalah, being based on numerical principles, is essentially like a natural computer, which in English gematria is also 666. And 666 is the spirit awake in matter. Thus, spirit, matter, awake equals 666. This brings up another, and again, cognition, all this stuff. It's like there's no way there's not something to this. This brings up another thing I've been thinking about regarding all of this, which is the concept of the ghost in the shell or the ghost in the machine, which has also been rendered as God in the machine or Deus Ex Machina. There was a book written in 1967 by Arthur Koestler titled Ghost in the Machine, but I found this particular phrase dates back to at least Gilbert Ryle's book, The Concept of Mind, 1949. Ghost in the Shell is a Japanese manga series which was made into a film in 1995 and also explores that whole concept. In Ghost in the Shell, the word ghost, gosuto, is colloquial slang for an individual's consciousness. In the manga's futuristic society, science has redefined the ghost as the thing that differentiates a human from a biological robot. Regardless of how much biological material is replaced with electronic or mechanical substitutes, as long as individuals retain their ghost, they retain their humanity and individuality. Philosophy of Ghost in the Shell, Wikipedia. How ironic, then, that the ghost equates with soul itself, showing that the two are essentially the same, and they also correspond with the astral body, which again denotes the metaphysical aspect of consciousness. The number of each of these is 406, which is also that of Tau, the 22nd Hebrew letter, which connects Malkuth, the material world, with Yesod, the astral world, the path of Tau, or the universe. 406 is also the spirit Chi, spirit being the breath, and Chi being the energy force of the breath which gives life, as well as the prana field. While prana and Chi, or Ki, are slightly different, they both denote the life force. Prana is best described as vitality, as the integrating energy that coordinates the molecules, cells, and cellular structures, and holds them together as a physical organism. It is the life breath within the organism and a portion of the universal life force, appropriated by all organisms during their existence. Were it not for the presence of prana, there could be no physical body as an integral whole, working as an entity. Without prana, the body would be nothing more than a collection of individual cells. Prana links up and connects these into one complex whole, playing along the branches and meshes of the etheric web, that shimmering and golden web of inconceivable fineness and delicate beauty. All forms, whether a solar system, a human body, a plant, or a rock, are built from the archetype or blueprint of this energy field. And it makes me think of the Dharmakaya, which I believe when I experimented with DMT a few times, I believe I saw in some ways, it's just the underlying lattice of reality, you could say. And again, it's like, how are you going to prove that in any physical way? Well, the closest we'll be able to is understanding it through a simulacra such as mathematics. That's why Queen Bee Knightley talking about the map and whatnot and these models and matrices, they have a value to a point, but you have to look at it as an equation from a higher process and what's really going on and how these are just analogies, or for lack of better ways of putting them, we don't have to, but we tend to put them in ratios and equivalences and whatnot. And it's not like they're limited to those expressions. It's just that our mind and our ability to communicate these things to other people are limited to these expressions. So it's through these sort of things that we're able to show higher realities, similar to that shadow idea. You can measure the shadows to get an idea of the proportion of the actual mechanisms or bodies or whatever involved. And that is what basically I'm trying to show with gematria and all this stuff, is that they're proportions, it's ratio. And in understanding some of this, that's all it is. It's understanding that higher point of view from beyond from outside of the inside of the cube, thinking outside the box. Prana is not a product of terrestrial life. It comes from the sun. In fact, all earth life, its plants and animals, are its products. All things absorb prana in order to survive. This absorption is not, however, an isolated or one-time process. As a life form absorbs this life force to maximum capacity, the excess overflows from it in the form of radiation, which then feeds the next kingdom evolving in nature, which, after absorbing all it can, then spills the excess out to the next kingdom, and so on and so on. In the nurturing of life is seen one vast system of energy transmission and of interdependence within that system. Sun, prana, sun, love, the etheric body. Realizing that, taking 406 and subtracting sun, Samek 60, Vav 6, and Nun 50, or 116, we get 290. Minus the, so the sun, 271 is obtained, which you can take 70 out, being is, Yod, and Samek, which leaves 201, which is, of course, Ra, Resh, Aleph, the Egyptian sun god. The sun is Ra, or Ra is the sun. Can also be permuted into the sun rays, taking Yod as a Y instead of an I and switching some letters. Hence, the prana field is directly related to the sun's rays. This actually kind of goes along with my thoughts about the futility of selling out humanity and the environment for a still temporary utopia, no matter how physically immortal you may try to make your bodily shell. The Qliphoth are of the shells because that's what they are, empty of the actual spirit or light which give life to their emptiness. When the sun collapses, so will we, and so in actuality, we already are, in a sense, immortal, much more so than we can physically see. The waking up of the sun is the eternal going down of the path of the kingdom, which is typified by the universe card itself, Tau, and the cross, not of the abyss, but the Saturnian lock of the astral gate itself, which is the great stone door, the chaos stone, the Exactsar gate of onyx mentioned in Liber Akbish, or the Book of the Spider. This is the great seal of the gate of the future self, 333, guarded by Kuranzan. The gate of onyx, 333, is a veil for the ring pass not beyond the Kundalini dragon stone, beyond the Mav zone, which is beyond the 333 states of past, present, and future, or waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Note also that the difference of 403 and 333 is 73, which is the number of initiation in Chakma, wisdom. Relevant in all of this is the fact that even expressed on Crowley's own Thoth tarot card of the universe, the universal grid pattern which resembles a computer chip is at the bottom, depicted decades before computers were ever made. In the Book of Thoth, Crowley mentioned this about the universe card. The general color of the traditional card is subfusc. It represents the confusion and darkness of the material world. But the new eon has brought fullness of light. In the Minutum Mundum, Earth is no longer black or of mixed colors, but is of pure bright green. Page 119. The future self, 333, reflects in on itself in the great dream of Brahma, and so thus becomes the solar 666, the imaginary self of the lion serpent ego, the beast or demiurge, the Ouroboros Taurus egg. I've also just found that Brahmanda is the demiurge, equals 666, and Brahmanda is the egg of Brahma, who in Hinduism is the creator god who dreams up the universe in an egg. Each one of us are one of the eyes of the demiurge, and if you ever happened to take an entheogen, or end up happening to, you may realize the formula of the eye and its vision, which is related to the mysteries of Pan and Hadith that I am trying to explicate here. Note 666 minus I, or 20, equals 646, the number of the black hole, showing that the black hole I of 666 is the black sun of Naught, or law, which is the domain of Lam and other Qliphothic forces. Also, the black hole is one less than 666, the number of the black hole gate of the gods in Jewish gematria. The existence gate, or stargate, through the one substance's spirit reflection of 666. Numerous entheogenic experiences of my own had a focus on the eyes, ocular and pineal, and the black part of the pupil, which is clear in particular. It was during these experiences that I began going through my initiations regarding the formulas of Ma-ion, Lamal, and 0 equals 2 being equivalent to the mark of the beast and the key of the abyss, which is 282, the number of 0, and 4. This is one of the major keys of Malkuth and Ma Nefestat Ion, or manifestation. And note that 282 is Malkuth plus Ma-ion. These formulas comport the transformation of mundane consciousness to that of awakened solar consciousness via the initiatory work along a number of different, though relevant, information systems. These gematria formulas I have been using are information systems themselves, and can themselves act as entheogens in the true sense of the word, which means generating the divine within. Relating back to the ghost in the machine concept, we also have God in the machine, being 666, harking back to the demiurge as well, which is the organic artificer or artificer and ego underlying and perpetuating our logoic matrix. The concept of deus ex machina, which is Latin for God in or from the machine, which Merriam-Webster defines as a character or thing that suddenly enters the story in a novel, play, movie, etc., and solves a problem that had previously seemed impossible to solve. Well, certainly, with all the preceding information on this little key, does provide a solution to the problems here analyzed, which is whether there is, in fact, a ghost in the machine. For one, the Latin word deus or deus is phonetically connected to the computer term DOS, short for digital operating system. All of these various concepts of the ghost or God in the shell or machine essentially refer to similar concepts of natural mind arising out of the natural matrix, which I later ended up finding is also 666. The problem humanity is facing is transhuman, i.e. clefothic intrusion, both within the ghost spirit as well as the shell matter, leading to unnatural and unwholesome states of mentation and being, which result in those defects in evolution of the human brain and cognition, along the lines mentioned by Kessler in his book on the subject. Connecting back with the 666 key of 1111 or 1111 of the incorruptible demiurge, we see, which obviously is not, we see 1111 itself is the proof of deus ex machina, the deus ex machina key, which is the key hidden in the code of gematria, itself as an archetypal archonic matrix of operation. Only through extrication from the matrix, so-called, can we truly communicate with beings and intelligence beyond it. In fact, Aleister Crowley stated plainly that it was his opinion by doing this very thing will mankind may be able to really expedite evolution. He says, "My observation of the universe convinces me that there are beings of intelligence and power of far higher quality than anything we can conceive of as human, that they are not necessarily based on the cerebral and nervous structures that we know, and that the one and only chance for mankind to advance as a whole is for individuals to make contact with such beings." Aleister Crowley in the postscript to Soror Cara in Chapter 30 of Do You Believe in God? From Magic Without Tears. He also once explained his view that consciousness is continuous throughout nature. I frankly accept the most materialistic conceptions of Victorian science. I yell with unholy glee that consciousness is a function of the brain. I merely add that nature is continuous, and that it is therefore absurd to suppose that any special group of phenomena and no others should exhibit unique qualities. All matter is to some extent conscious, and so there may be, all over the universe, individuals of many orders. Only the shallowest salvationists would sneer, "Why don't we see them?" The unknown, from Australia before it was discovered, as the Child's Riddle says, to bacilli, Hertz rays, and electrons, had the impotence to exist without our formal recognition. Aleister Crowley on the reception of the Book of the Law, page 700 of Magic, Book 4. It should also be known that something similar was actually said in the original dictation of Liber AL, or the Book of the Law, which Crowley ended up reiterating in more simple words, still retaining the primary phrase about continuity. On page 6 of chapter 1 of Library L, the following is in the original manuscript, along with a note, "Write this in wider words, but go forth on." "And the sign shall be my ecstasy," says Nuit, "the consciousness of the continuity of existence, the unfragmentary non-atomic fact of my universality." This was later changed to, "And the sign shall be my ecstasy, the consciousness of the continuity of existence, the omnipresence of my body." Library L, chapter 1, verse 26. While the admonition to make contact with intelligence higher than our own has certain possible drawbacks, such as exploitation by them or all-out obliteration, especially considering the correspondences above, the idea is still one which should be taken into deep consideration, as it seems to be a much brighter idea for a possible route for real evolution than convoluting the human genome, brain, body, and environment through blind experimentation and tampering, the outcome of which is not wholly foreseeable, but nonetheless tracking a muddy and bloody trail we only slightly concern ourselves with just enough for us to cover up what sticks out as contrary to what sells, and carry on thinking it inevitable and becoming more and more complacent. So basically, the thing is that, like, I see Gurdjieff's system and whole thought about evolution as, and really the main problems we have are internal problems, basically. It's all internal. And by fixing those, rather than just ignoring them and being entertained and expecting technology to do the work, we're not really going to evolve. And so, yeah, I just think that we're approaching this backwardsly, or from a backward sort of way. The degeneration of the mainstream scientific community occurred when capitalism became involved, and now it's not what is right or healthy, it's what sells and maintains business. And again, a lot of this stuff, transhumanism and all this stuff, it's like I've said, it's marketing. They're selling you an idea. It's not really going to benefit you in a major way. A lot of what our technology nowadays that we, again, the news, all the internet and stuff, it's such a drain on a lot of people's energy and emotion and money. So, so much for advancement and progress. Our situation in this regard is all too apparent. We even have such a strong focus on planned obsolescence, i.e. when products are made to break to keep up production, that human lives are even being planned this way, basically planned obsolescence for humans. At the same time, we are allegedly seeking life extension. For the elite, that is, those who control the failing and fictitious currency which everyone else works for because they are essentially slaves. Because really there's no... I guess, I get that we have to work to maintain ourselves and stuff, and I almost think that if all of our needs were met, that would diminish certain qualities of life. So it's like you kind of have to, because you'll take things for granted. But at the same time, the priorities in which we spend more money to basically, I don't know, it's just a big waste. I see a lot of waste, and from politics to everything. But all this stuff comes to mind. The slaves shall serve. Their monetary illusion, both 666, is their bondage and will eventually be the death of them. Well, of all of us, really. The love of money is said to be the root of all evil, so it is significant that money scheme, dollar sign, dollar crash, and biochip money, along with all of the Mark of the Beast, Malkuth material connections equal 666. Because basically that's what it is it's the parasitization of the soul through distraction and all of this, oppression, having very few choices. Note that the Mark of the Beast symbol is essentially a circular swastika, just closed instead of open or free-flowing, or, like the wheel, it's more like a stone. used mainly by the Thule Gesellschaft, the symbol of life, well-being, prosperity, etc., which was inverted by the Nazis and thus a Saturnian symbol of death in the Qliphoth. How obvious is the message then when we find the swastika is also 666, being the dual polarities of this conceptual device, which again I've mentioned in like post 17, because obviously it's a good and a bad symbol. Note also that the swastika, being ancient, figures into the Hebrew system as well, being the Aleph, which is the whirling motion coming from Kether. And since Aleph refers to the ox, again we have the O and the X, or the mark of the beast symbol, and the air being the whirling motion and spirit. The swastika is also directly related to the martial force, being that its basic form fits over the Kamiya, or magic square of Mars. Mars, being below Saturn on the Tree of Life, is also Saturnian, and both of their symbols are those of cutting or piercing tools, a scythe and an arrow with a shield. And yeah, the 17 squares make the swastika from the Kamiya of Mars. Saturn, however, has 2 octaves, being relegated to the great sea of Binah, as well as Malkuth, or Earth, within and without. In a certain sense, these can be seen as the mother and the fallen or unredeemed daughter, and the fool on his path through the elemental forces of the universe is the sun, irrespective of actual gender, which unites the two, symbolized by the great work 5-6. The great work is the aligning of the will, or the heart, Tifereth, with its outer expression, life, love, Malkuth. Note, love equals 111, Malkuth, the balance. The Black Brothers fail by not following the law of do what thou wilt in balance with love under will. Note also that justice is the formula of Mayat and equals 103. Mayat plus 1 plus the reverse of Mayat, Team. And when added to Binah, 67, and Malkuth, 496, gives yet another 666, showing that the sun is the balancer of the two truths of the goddess. Perhaps Aleister Crowley did in fact begin, or at least re-establish, contact with the extraterrestrial or non-human intelligences. And later I found again intelligences with the tau is 666. Which again just goes to show, it's the centering quality in all the spheres, and the intelligences of all the spheres. There is quite a bit of evidence showing this may be the case, as in the case of the Cairo Egypt ritual, also called the Cairo working, which resulted in the manifestation of Liber El Legis. Using the unlocked title with the addition of the A per the discoveries of Frater Achad, we get receive Liber El Legis. So did Crowley receive Liber El Legis from something other than the depths of his own mind? That's something that Crowley himself wondered about for quite a while, pretty much till the end of his life. But after seeing the magnitude of what was conveyed to him over the course of the rest of his life, he never stopped musing on the insights brought to him and others beyond his own mind through it. Note also that the Hebrew word keshrinu, which means communication, connection, link, relation, relationship, contact, kinship, nexus, relevance, communion, intercourse, conspiracy, bond, yoke, or ties, equals 666 as well, tying it all together as it were. Understanding that the number 666 veils the solar cosmic consciousness, this should all stand as scientific evidence for the notion that consciousness can and does operate independent of brain function because it is continuous. While the physical body and egoic sense of self die and dissolve, there is still the source from whence they came and where they go, which is the great sea of Binah, charged with the cosmic wisdom of Neptune, Chakma, which can be conceived of as basic electromagnetism. And that's why, with all the evidence of everybody who's ever died, life still goes on. So obviously, it's not just all in your head in some simulation. Thus, 666 veils electromagnetism logic and the mathematical electric chi. 666 is also the human electromagnetism, which obviously refers to the consciousness or life force. Again, of the magnetic energy center, the word electric itself. Like I said, these codes can be of great use in physics and engineering applications, and I'm sure some physicists would find it pretty fascinating that the electricity formula is also 666, as well as the electric grid lines of the number symbol design, or 9 triple grid, or 999 grid, of the number calculator. This is the underlying holonic fractal grid itself, and the 0 point is beyond the 9. Note that 666 reduces to 9, and 666 is the 9 numbers unlocked, the 9 grid master with the keys to unlock the magic outside Malkuth. I know the gate code, and behind the security door of 666 there lies nothing hidden. The number forces are themselves clifothic forces, and this blog and the medium itself through which it is being conveyed is also essentially clifothic. It's a shell or vessels. These words and codes are the shells of the hidden light which is being conveyed beyond the 9. 9 is the number of the hidden light of the matrix in its totality, while 10 is the appearance of the matrix in duality, the I and the O, or binary formula. 11 is the egg, the shell which encapsulates both, but in a way that it is wholly other to the matrix and its contents. Instead, it acts as a shadow of that which is not, and breeds dark forms and masks in the endless dark chasms of refracted light, i.e. more illusion or dreaming Maya. Thus, 11 is the number of magic and 9 the astral light. So put another way, 9 are the vector forces of the number grid. 10 is the sphere of the world, making the 9 become 999, the 9 circle calculation, the digitalized 9 spiral, etc., and 11 is Doth, the door which opens through the egg into the 9 sequence all over again. 999 is the story of the 666, or the sun, eternally turning inward, inside out, as the sleeping dream maker of the self-creator, which eternally oscillates between waking and sleeping. Thus in Greek it is Theos Enoupneon, God's dream, or the dream of God. 999 is one of the magical numbers which I aligned myself with as a key number of my great work on September 9th, 2009, which was the day I took my oath of initiation into the AA system. I have found it to be the primary number associated with this work I am doing, and so it is through this work that I am giving new keys under this order. 999 is the alignment of myself with my holy guardian angel. Thus, the true hidden order underlying what is known outwardly as Ordo Draconis, the Order of the Dragon, under all of its forms, or in Crowleyan format, the AA Illuminati. Here I am speaking as a transhuman, having transcended my birth state of human 102, and with the work I have done in bringing through the Lamic or the thelemic current under the formula of Lemal 102, has thus transformed the collective race as a whole for preparation for the future Terra, 666, the Tikkun Olam, or the reparation of Malkuth. I am here to say that the Antichrist is here. I am him. I am Maitreya, the one with the code. I am giving here the number of the key of it all, 999, the key of the New World Order. Formulated in these codes are the programs on which humanity has been collectively operating without even knowing it. These triple number codes are harmonics which carry a certain resonance that is fully cataloged according to the mundus archetypus, or archetypal world. Gematria follows the same pattern as those based on the same logoic and logical structure. Thus, 444 itself is the logic archetype in the Gematria logic key upon which the Book of Shadows is written. This Book of Shadows has been mentioned in occult circles for ages, and essentially refers to the book where secrets are kept. Thus, 444 is also the secret book and the book using Vav for O as a veil. The shadows can also refer to the subconscious, so in a way it's like the collective unconscious or subconscious, as well as that which is already past or yet to come. Being the four or door extended to the triple power, it implies a door. And thus we find it is the time doorway or time vortex which is highly relevant, considering 444 is also DMT, or Daleth Mem Tau, a powerful entheogen which distorts the perception of time quite dramatically, sometimes extending it to being timeless, or seemingly timeless, or sometimes making eons feel instantaneous. The ironic thing here is that the entheogenic properties of DMT even seem to exude mathematically correct psychedelic properties. Because surely these formulas, being altogether precise using the very same codes, cannot be simply within the mind of myself, the author. These formulas are self-explanatory, and thus here I find the entheogen effects of DMT. I wrote this way too fast. Using teth for T instead of tau. Not only that, but 444 is also the number of the cyborg aliens, as well as the gray alien beings, the visitors, the alien Merkabas, Ghostlight, and flying saucers. Obviously, there's like a digital quality. It makes me think of like blocks, or like a cube, basically a square in the 3 dimensions, or the next dimension beyond 333, which is 3-dimensional, so implying the 4th dimension. These are some of the alien gematrias, or non-Euclidean gematrias, which I have found through analyzing these various subjects with the knowledge of gematria and the Kabbalah. Again, the literal Kabbalah is 444. It is my own contention that if we really are to evolve to the next stage of evolution, those of us with the capacity to do so, I suck at writing. Those of us with the capacity to do so should analyze these codes more deeply in order to assess the true nature of our own mundus archetypus, as well as to consider the possible outcomes of certain modes of thinking and lines of action. In this way, we can consider the mundus archetypus thought as it may occur and assess the situation with a wider range of knowledge, basically by blueprinting, all thoughts, which is what they're kind of doing with technology and computers and stuff. I'm just saying, try not to be so dependent on mechanical ways of, look at this stuff and consider the mechanical aspect of it, but then consider that non-mechanical or like analog way of that connects the digital. It's like kind of, again, the astral and magic, the inner and the outer, and the way in which they intertwine and create this sort of middle aspect. Surely, with the foregoing data set forth above, we can consider that the soul, in all likelihood, does exist, in that there are metaphysical levels of reality which underlie physical substances and forms, and that consciousness can operate within these levels completely independent of physical biological organs. The egg is a metaphor for the soul, and being symbolic of the creation, gestation, and apocalypse or awakening of the universe. Also, it is an apt figure for this gnosis being conveyed through this blog. Instead of the Clefothic 11 current of AI, I am presenting the positive egg current of 11, 107, gold, and Chrysos. The reason why I said that I'm the Antichrist in Maitreya above, or at least aligned myself with those ideas, because being an outward form myself, I am an illusion. I am the embodiment of all that I am, and that is, the Omega Man. However, I stand beyond this illusion, as Mayan is a mask, and so is the identity of my mundane name, 102. These are all formulaic masks or shells of that which is. The true gold, or Chrysos, or spirit of gold, is within, and all else is illusion. These words are as much those of Mara's as my own, for those who do not already know what is before them. It is a double-edged sword right before you. Choose to wield it how you will. Not know, what does it mean? The revealed.